he's desperate to get out, and that's where Thomas Tuchel comes into play. Don't assume just because Ruben Amorim has gone that suddenly, the path is clear for Rashford to return. I'm not sure about the Carlo Ancelotti links. I've always rallied against the possibility of Gareth Southgate coming in. I think if a Bayern Munich or a Barcelona or a Real Madrid come calling, then I think Bruno would be very tempted. This is an attempt to force his way out of the football club.
Welcome to The Window on talkSPORT, brought to you by Intuit Quickbooks. Save time and unlock growth with integrated business tools and AI automation all in one place. We are well and truly into this transfer window, so let's get the latest from talkSPORT's chief football correspondent, Alex Crook. So, Crookie, let's start with our favourite subject, Manchester United. There's been a fair amount of turmoil at the top, and talkSPORT understands that the Glazers are in town.
Yeah, this will go down like a lead balloon with Manchester United fans. Obviously, there's already a protest planned, I think, for the Fulham game at home on February the 1st, but they might want to bring it forward to the Manchester derby this weekend, because as you say, it's our understanding that Joel and Avram Glazer have flown into Manchester, so Jim Ratcliffe is doing likewise, is to hold their executive committee meeting, which would usually take place in Monaco, which is obviously where Ratcliffe is based most of the time, but they've decided to hold it in Manchester, I think, to give the Glazers the opportunity to hold face-to-face talks with Michael Carrick, the Manchester United manager or head coach. And it was interesting, actually, in the press release, they didn't say that he was interim, did they? They said he was in charge for the rest of the season, but that word interim was seemingly deliberately left out of the announcement release. I think they're also saying they don't want to cause too much disruption ahead of this Manchester derby, but one assumes if they're flying in for talks at the back end of this week on Thursday and Friday, you would imagine that the Glazers will be in the director's box come the City game, and I can only imagine the type of reception they're going to get from the bulk of home supporters.
So these aren't necessarily crisis talks. This is a meeting that would be happening anyway.
Yeah, but you would imagine that they're going to discuss their approach for the final couple of weeks of the transfer window. It's been very quiet so far, both in terms of incomings and outgoings. Will that change now that Michael Carrick is in situ? I don't think they're going to sign players just for Michael Carrick, just for the rest of the season. But the word coming out of Carrington is that if an opportunity arises to sign a player who can be of use long term, then maybe they would consider it. That could bring the likes of Ruben Neves and maybe even João Gomez at Wolves into play. But as we sit here now, I'm not anticipating too much activity. Outgoings is interesting because obviously Kobbie Mainoo was trying to leave the club when Ruben Amorim was manager. He's got his opportunity now. Darren Fletcher played him from the start against Brighton. He wasn't brilliant, it has to be said, but I think he will get more minutes between now and the end of the season, so he will stay. And it looks like Roma are cooling in their interest on Joshua Zirkzee. They've got a deal over the line for Donyell Malen at Villa, and I think they've been aware for a while now that Manchester United aren't particularly keen to let Zirkzee go in this window, even though I think he would like to go and try a new challenge.
Yeah, and there's a lot of talk about Bruno Fernandes as well, that he might want to leave either this month or in the summer.
Yeah, I don't think he'll go this month, Fernandes. I think he'll at least stay until the end of the season. But I wrote in my notebook on the talkSPORT website a few weeks ago now, after he did that bombshell interview in Portugal, where he said basically the owners were willing to cash in on him when he had offers from Saudi Arabia last summer. There's players in that dressing room who feel that was the beginning and the end for Bruno Fernandes. They feel like he will leave in the summer. He's got this release clause, I think of around £57 million that can be activated by European clubs. And I think if a Bayern Munich or a Barcelona or a Real Madrid come calling, then I think Bruno would be very tempted, because he's been a great servant to Manchester United. Yes, you can debate whether or not he's been a good captain, but certainly in terms of goals and assists and what he brings to the team, he's comfortably the best signing the club have made since Sir Alex Ferguson's departure. And I think he deserves the opportunity to go now and put some silverware in the cabinet to match his undoubted talent.
Do you think that the departure of Amorim could affect his decision to leave? Because we know that Amorim had said that he wanted to keep hold of him, and it seems like the club would be happy to cash in on him considering his age. So maybe Amorim leaving has affected things?
Amorim certainly fought to keep him last summer at a time when, as we've already mentioned, and Bruno's admitted himself, Ineos and Sir Jim Ratcliffe were prepared to let him go. I guess it could depend on who comes in. You know, if they do, as they're telling us, go for a big name, a top-class coach in the summer, a Thomas Tuchel, could that convince Bruno Fernandes to give it one final go? I think he's exasperated by the turnover of managers, and you have to remember there's been more Manchester United managers post Sir Alex Ferguson than there were in the 17 years between Busby and Ferguson actually coming to the football club. So that tells you all you need to know about the decision-making, the fact that numerous managers have tried and failed, and some of them, like Jose Mourinho and Louis van Gaal, have had success elsewhere. Obviously, Ruben Amorim did a very good job in Portugal. So you're going to have to ask the question eventually. I'm sure the players are asking this question. Is the issue really in the dugout, or does it go a lot deeper than that? And I think we both agree that it goes a lot deeper.
Of course, and I guess if United aren't planning to appoint someone until after the World Cup, for argument's sake, surely Bruno Fernandes, could be speaking to his family, his agent, to make a decision long before a new manager would have even had a chance to come in and change his mind. So it is a little bit concerning. Now, as we all know, Michael Carrick is in charge at Old Trafford. Simon Jordan, he's, of course, had his say on the appointment.
I mean, Carrick did a good job at Middlesbrough. It's interesting because when I'm speaking to various people last week, there were various people that were finding out whether Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was in a frame, and Mike Phelan hadn't been contacted. So there was this thought process that, Phelan and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer travelled together, as we've seen previously.
Sure.
So whether they have reacted to a public backlash or the perception of people criticising the fact this appointment hadn't worked previously and you're going back without any innovation, or whether Carrick, because I heard that Carrick wants to be a coach, wants to be a number two, doesn't want to be a front man.
Yeah.
But he clearly did a decent job at Middlesbrough. Clearly he's a sensible head, and it looks different. And that's, I think, one of the criticisms about the Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Not against Ole, I have my own views on whether he's a good manager or not, but because it didn't look particularly, in any shape or form, like there was any thinking behind it. Oh, okay, that looks like a popular fit. Everyone likes him. He's unchallenging in people's minds. Well, and that might well be the challenge that Man United have to do now, which is keep on playing to an optic rather than getting an outcome.
Yeah.
Carrick, what will he do? We'll see. He's done, as I say, he's done a decent job at Middlesbrough, but
Yeah.
Man United's a whole different ballgame.
I like Steve Holland, I must admit.
Does Ben White like him?
Go on.
Does Ben White like him? Should we get Ben White on the phone and ask what he thinks of Steve Holland? Because neither one fell out.
Right.
Neither one fell out with him. I don't know.
Was that the fallout?
He's part of an underworld. Look, Gareth Southgate did a fabulous job in terms of getting England back to the level that they should have been at in the first place, and that all the people that went before should hold their heads in shame about the lack of achievements. But we did fall short, and we were a mentality that people criticised about not having big game mentality when it came across. We didn't beat anybody that we couldn't beat.
No, you didn't.
We being England, yes.
Yeah.
But we were there to do it. You were sitting at home on your sofas in Glasgow watching it.
Yeah, having a national holiday.
Having a
Cheers.
national holiday.
Yeah.
But so Holland formed part of that. So how great is that? I don't know. But it's a Fletcher. What's he done in the last two games? I don't know.
So have we got an update, Crookie, on who United might be looking at long term? You told us exclusively last week that England manager Thomas Tuchel will be towards the top of their list. Is there anyone else who might be in contention?
Well, Luis Enrique keeps getting a mention, but A, he's still got a job at Paris Saint-Germain, and B, he's not proven in the Premier League. And I do think Premier League experience is quite high on United's checklist when it comes to potential replacements. I'm not sure Oliver Glasner did himself any favours by getting dumped out of the FA Cup by Macclesfield at the weekend. Mauricio Pochettino is someone who the hierarchy have always admired, and I think he'll come available when the USA inevitably crash out quite early in this World Cup. I'm not sure about the Carlo Ancelotti links, to be honest. I think they'll go for a younger guy, and that's where Thomas Tuchel comes into play. Then there's Roberto De Zerbi, who we know spoke to United before when Erik ten Hag was manager, and he wasn't particularly keen to come in at that stage, but the vibes coming from his camp are that he might be more open to it this time around. So there are a lot of options out there. I do think it's a bit of a gamble if you wait until the World Cup, because obviously Thomas Tuchel would hope that he can lead England to the final in New Jersey. That's about July the 20th. That seems quite late for me, for Manchester United to get a new manager in place. And then you run the risk, if Tuchel wins the World Cup, will he then be tempted to stay on and try and have the Euros as well?
In your opinion, what have you made of the Steve Holland situation? Because him being in Michael Carrick's coaching staff, it implies that Gareth Southgate could be on the list. Is that realistic? Do you think that he would be a good fit for United?
No. In a word, I've always rallied against the possibility of Gareth Southgate coming in, because I just don't think his record at club level is good enough. And as well as he did with England, I think when it came to the big games, he didn't have the ability to get us over the winning line. And that would, for me, count against him when it came to a pressurised job like Manchester United. I'm not sure that Gareth Southgate is desperate to get back into management. If you read his recent book about leadership, it just hints to me that maybe he feels his career will go in a different direction. I can see why people have put two and two together. I actually think Steve Holland is a really sensible appointment. Someone who's worked under some of the best managers of modern times, someone who is really highly regarded as a coach, someone who Ben White, apart the England players, really bought into. And I think having a voice from outside his inner circle, because obviously Jonathan Woodgate tends to follow Michael around. Johnny Evans is someone he knows from his playing days. Travis Binion was part of the club because he's been promoted from under-21s coach. To have someone who's not part of that, to give a different voice and a different opinion, I think could be really beneficial between now and the end of the season. And I wouldn't be against Steve Holland being kept on, whoever comes in. You'd have thought if it is a Thomas Tuchel, there may well be a job for him beyond the summer.
So when Gareth says, my LinkedIn title reads leader, manager, coach, in that order.
Yeah.
Post Michael Carrick, should Manchester United be interested in Gareth?
Well, I have to say, and I say these things with caution at my best.
No, caution never comes into it.
Well, it doesn't really, does it? But I'm just qualifying it. I don't dislike Gareth at all. I think Gareth is a very nice fellow, but a leader he is not, in my view. I think he leads you to a certain point of view, but a real leader, a real person that will do whatever it takes to win something, that's not Gareth Southgate. I think he's a very organised, very decent, very solid man. If that is the answer to Man United's question, then they need to think very carefully about what they're doing, and that should compound the thinking that Man United fans may have about what they do and don't know. If Jim Radcliffe really genuinely believes, and I've been told that this is something that he does, that Gareth Southgate is the answer, then Man United fans should be concerned, because he's not the answer. He does not provide the solution. He doesn't lead you back to the Holy Land.
What you've been hearing that there are those.
But it's been going for some time. It's been going for some time. I mean, I know that people are getting the conspiracy theories together and seeing Steve Holland in the mix and thinking that's a natural precursor to Gareth Southgate going back in the building. If you believe that Gareth Southgate is the answer to Man United's problems, then you're deluded. He is not. He's a good manager. He's a decent manager. He's never given any indications at domestic level. And Man United's problems are far more deeper than having a decent guy that can communicate nicely with the media.
Finally, on Manchester United, a lot of talk about Marcus Rashford and his future. Reportedly, Barcelona don't want to pay this €30 million option to buy without first proposing a more economical option, like a second loan. I think that we can safely say on this story that we don't imagine Marcus Rashford returning to Manchester United, but then you also think Thomas Tuchel's a big fan, but the sun has probably set, and you almost can't blame him for wanting to stay at a club like Barcelona.
No, this was the main story on my notebook on Tuesday, that don't assume just because Ruben Amorim has gone that suddenly, the path is clear for Rashford to return, because I think when he left, that was as much a club decision as it was that of an exasperated manager. We've all seen the pictures of him dancing in the dressing room after that victory over Real Madrid in the Clásico at the weekend. He looks happy as Larry in Barcelona. He looks rejuvenated. He's back in the England squad. As you say, Thomas Tuchel is a big fan, but I think United's plan would still be to get him off the wage bill. Interestingly, Ben Jacobs was reporting, wasn't he, our colleague, that maybe Barcelona are keen to bring down the £26 million option. I still think £26 million for a fully firing Marcus Rashford is a bargain, so I hope United dig their heels in there and make sure they get maximum value.
I completely agree. It would be an absolute steal and pretty disappointing. Switching gears now to the future of West Ham's Lucas Paqueta. Now, Andy Goldstein and Darren Bent, they've had their say and given a few opinions.
Listen, is the type of player, I think, Lucas Paqueta, that when he's firing on all cylinders, great player to have in your team.
Brilliant.
But when you're in a relegation battle, when you're in the trenches, you don't want him.
No, I agree with you. It's a really difficult one, because I'm always like, there's no point keeping a player that doesn't want to be there, because he's going to offer you nothing. If he's made it clear that you're in a fight for your lives in terms of at the bottom of the table, where you need every single one of your players to be pulling their weight, and he turns around and says, I want to go back to Flamengo. I want to go to Flamengo, right? He wants to leave, which means he doesn't fancy the fight. He wants off. I'm almost like, just get a deal done and get him out of the club, because if you force him to stay, you'll never get the same player that was there when he was happy to be there and scoring his goals and assisting and playing really well. But then on the flip side, you're almost like, well, we need him, because West Ham haven't got that many players that are firing. And when he does decide to turn up, he's one of the best players, if not their best player. So it's almost like a catch-22. But I'm just like, do you know what? I would rather someone with less ability in my team that I know wants to be there and is going to give 100%, than someone who I know can be a 9, but most of this season has been a 4.
It wasn't that long ago he scored that goal and he gave it the old, don't bother phoning me. I'm West Ham through and through. And all that nonsense.
It's embarrassing.
But is that just footballers? Is that what they do?
Well, I mean, that is just that's a bit
I
blatant.
know it is. I know it
Do
is.
you know what I mean? I don't like to see that, but this is where West Ham need him the most, and he's decided to take this opportunity to go, nah, this ain't for me.
How do West Ham? He's got a back problem, which is something you can't.
Trust me, that's one of those where you can mask it from the scan.
Yeah.
The MRI.
Nothing's showing up. Well, I've got a back problem. My back hurts.
Exactly.
Nothing to do about
Trust
it.
me, I've heard that one before.
How will West Ham fans feel about him? Do they want him out now?
Again, they're probably caught as well because they're probably thinking, well, if he doesn't want to be here, get rid of him. But they need him.
Yeah.
And I know they're in a relegation battle and he's been there all season, but every now and then he will produce moments of magic. Like Chelsea, when he hits that one, bang, and it flies to the top. He can produce moments of magic. You just don't see him nowadays often enough. But again, as I just said there, I would rather someone who's got less ability than him, but wants to be at the club, that wants to give 100%, because you're going to get more out of him. If the board say he ain't going anywhere, he's staying, and he throws his toys out the pram, what's the point? You're paying him a fortune to do nothing.
Management Max is behind a glass, big West Ham fan, season ticket holder. Do you want him at the club? Give me a thumbs up if you still want him at the club. Max is pondering. He does. He still wants him at the club.
Because he's a good player. So you need him. But if you're going to get the Paqueta we've seen all season that hasn't really tried a leg, what is the point?
Yeah.
So, Crookie, the player wants to leave the club, but will he get what he wants?
Debatable, because Nuno Espirito Santo is desperate to keep him. Interestingly, the Brazilian transfer window doesn't close until the first week in March, so they've got a bit of time on this one, West Ham. So if they can get him back playing and maybe pick up some wins between now and March, perhaps they might be more open to doing a deal then. But he's desperate to get out. Flamengo have had one bid rejected. He wants to go back to his homeland in Brazil. I think he has done actually since the fallout from those betting allegations. He's not been quite the same player, West Ham fans would tell you. But it's really interesting because he was back at the training ground early this week. He didn't train, and sources close to Paqueta were suggesting he's got a back issue. That's why he missed the game at the FA Cup against QPR at the weekend. West Ham sources would tell you he didn't play in the FA Cup because he wants out. There's no guarantee that he'll feature against Spurs this weekend, another club who've been linked with him, but I'm told there's absolutely no chance from Paqueta's side of that happening. But West Ham sources are saying he isn't injured and this is an attempt to force his way out of the football club.
I mean, if they do sell him, I guess the question that fans will be asking is, will they reinvest the money properly, especially considering the chances of staying in the Premier League seem to be slipping away now?
Well, they spent big money already. They spent £50 million on two forwards in Pablo and Tati Castellanos. So I've got to say, I was quite impressed with against QPR at the weekend, albeit against the Championship side. But Pablo put himself around. Castellanos got his first goal, which always helps settle to a new club. I think they will bring in a centre-back and maybe a goalkeeper between now and the end of the window. So they're giving it a go, West Ham. I guess the big question is the damage already done? Are they already too far adrift? But Forest have got Arsenal this weekend. They're not going to win that game. Arsenal will pick up the 3 points there. West Ham are at home to Spurs. Spurs in a little bit of disarray. We know the fans and seemingly the players are not having Thomas Frank. So if they were to win this game, suddenly that 7-point gap becomes 4. And maybe with the injection of the new signings, they just might have a chance of a great escape. And that's why I think Nuno believes they've got a better opportunity to stay up with Paqueta available than with him back in Brazil.
And you mentioned Nottingham Forest there. We know that the club and Everton as well are on the hunt for a new striker this season. Is there anyone in particular on their respective lists?
En-Nesyri is a name that's been mentioned with Everton in the last 24 hours. Someone actually West Ham have tried to sign on a couple of occasions. I think he'd be a good addition for David Moyes. I think he'd work wonders with that squad to get them as high in the table as they are without a natural goal scorer. Maybe harshly, I've called Barry and Beto, their two centre forwards, the Chuckle brothers, but they're just not going to score goals, are they? So yeah, I can see why En-Nesyri makes sense for them. And I keep coming back to Jurgen Strand-Larsen and Forest because he seems to me the archetypal Sean Dyche signing, the big centre forward who can hold the ball up, score goals. Wolves are open to offers. Maybe the asking price is still a little bit too high at this stage, and that's why clubs are biding their time, hoping it drops between now and the window. But they need help, Forest, because Chris Wood is unavailable. He's been a massive loss. I'm not sure that Igor Jesus is the answer when it comes to the Premier League, so definitely a centre forward has to be their priority.
Now, elsewhere, Conor Gallagher's move from Tottenham to Atletico Madrid is complete. Our own Danny Murphy has had his say on this move.
I mean, he's a super athlete, tenacious. I mean, Bentancur's out, Bergval's out. I think Sarr's been missing with the AFCON. The reality is he's not going to fix their problems because creatively they've got too many players missing. They don't look like they can score enough goals, make enough chances. He'll compete with the other midfielders. Yeah, he's similar to Bergval in a way. It's a strange one, but maybe Bentancur and Sarr.
You seem a bit underwhelmed by it.
Well, no, I think if all Spurs midfielders are fit, you could still argue he'd get in if you need because you need some of that in the middle of the park, and he's at it, like he's good at what he does, but he's not a creative force, and that's what they're sadly missing at the moment. Without Maddison, without Kulusevski, without Solanke. So I thought if they were going to go in the market, I know they're probably looking big for more down the line, 4 or 5 years down the line, but I thought they might still go for something creative. He's good, but I don't know if he's that different than what they've got.
I get you.
So Gallagher turned down a move to Aston Villa in the process of joining Spurs. Does this mean that Villa will be spending that money on someone else this month?
Not necessarily. I'm intrigued by the fact they've let Daniel Marlon go out to Roma because the squad isn't that deep anyway. So I think probably another forward will come in. Maybe Tammy Abraham. We know they're a big fan of him, and he'd like to come back to the Premier League. He was there and had a pretty successful stint first time round. But in terms of Conor Gallagher, the big issue that Villa had because of PSR is they could only do a loan deal with an option stroke obligation. Atletico wanted something more permanent. Tottenham put 40 million euros on the table, and it was pretty much done in an instant. I think from Connor's point of view, he just wanted to come back to the Premier League so he could try and get within the mind's eye of Thomas Tuchel, try and catch his attention between now and the World Cup. And he knows at Spurs that he instantly improves their midfield. He's going to be a regular first-team starter, whereas maybe at Villa, when you look at the competition there, McGinn, Tielemans, Onana, Kamaru's having an excellent season, maybe he wouldn't necessarily be guaranteed that starting spot that he needs in order to get back in the England squad.
And finally, I know that you've been talking about the Mark Gay situation. Seems like this is one that will go on into the summer, as you've reported before. Just wanted to touch quickly on Xabi Alonso, because he's left his role at Real Madrid. What could the future hold for him, and could it be at Manchester City? Because there were stories last month that they were looking for replacements for Pep Guardiola should he leave at the end of the season. Enzo Maresca's name was mentioned. Is Alonso someone you could see being on their list?
Absolutely, because I think you look at what he did at Bayer Leverkusen, he was a miracle worker with that invincible season they had. Obviously, wrestled the title away from Bayern Munich, which doesn't happen very often in Germany. And actually, he only lost 6 games at Real Madrid. The problem wasn't necessarily the results or the performances. It was the fact that he was struggling to deal with the egos. And actually, what you can say about Manchester City, they're not a particularly egotistical squad. So I think he might find it easier to get his message across at City than he did at the Bernabeu. I think he'll take the rest of the season off and assess his options in the summer. Wouldn't surprise me if Manchester United at least have the conversation. I know the Liverpool link might be a barrier, but they have just brought in a former Leeds player in Jonathan Woodgate as assistant to Michael Carrick, and Jason Wilcox is an ex-Leeds United player as well, and obviously him and Berard are both former Manchester City employees, so don't totally rule it out. Listen, I don't think what's happened at Real Madrid makes Alonso a bad coach. I think he's a very good coach. He was high on Liverpool's list before Arne Slot got the job, and who knows if they miss out on the Champions League, could they consider a change and maybe he'd be a contender there. I don't think he's going to be short of offers, put it that way.
Yeah, and of course we talk about Manchester City, Manchester United. The Manchester Derby at Old Trafford is live and exclusive on talkSPORT at 12:30 on Saturday. Crookie and I will probably be biting our nails, fingers, listening, with massive anxiety. You never know. The magic of the Manchester Derby, as I've said before. Something crazy could happen, but it might be a tough watch for you and I. But thank you very much for joining me and giving us all of that transfer information. And for all the latest transfer stories, you can of course check out Crookie's transfer notebook on the website talksport.com. You've been watching The Window on talkSPORT, brought to you by Intuit Quickbooks. Save time and unlock growth with integrated business tools and AI automation all in one place.